Howdy, folks. Welcome to Lean Enterprise Division's webinar this month. We've got Dr. Ron Kelley presenting the new voice of the customer. And I'm the organizer, Manny Veloso. So just a little bit of information about the next webinar, which is Wednesday, October 14th. And the topic is, it's not all about manufacturing. So there's going to be some legal, actually law firms, as well as some medical. So should be pretty interesting. If you've been on a webinar before, I'm sure you know that you're going to end up getting this certificate for your RUs. And that'll be sent out to you automatically. If you want to ask questions, you certainly can. You can see here it shows how to do that. Also, too, I want to point out that we have a number of handouts that have been uploaded there. So Dr. Kelley is going to be talking about them, and he'll go through and explain what each one of those is for. Here's just a little bit of the introduction for Dr. Ronald J. Kelley. He's president of Green Gap Solutions, and is very active too in ASQ. So let's see, I think that's about it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Kelley and take it away.
All right, here we go. Anyway, thank you, Manny and Ellen, who's not able to make it here because she's stuck in the snow. We were just talking about airports. I can't believe that there was snow in Denver that prevented her from getting back. So anything can happen at any time. That's pretty interesting. So yeah, I just needed that. So anyway, today we're going to talk about the new voice of the customer. And before we do that, and I want to thank the Lean Enterprise Division. This is exciting to me. I've joined a couple of years ago, and I gave a similar talk to the conference not too long ago, but this should be better. So I'd like to start out with this poll, and Manny tells me I gave him too many choices. So you're not going to see the quality control choice in there. So if you can open the poll, right, Manny?
Okay, there. So I've released the first poll.
Okay. I just want to get a feeling for what people here are involved in, or they view themselves.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to close this one poll, and we should be able to see now. How about sharing? So as you can see, a lot of people, almost half, are involved in process improvement in one way, shape, or form.
Right. And so how many people does it show there? I can't see this very well. I don't want to pop it up. It says for innovation, that's pretty low on the list, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to convince you that that's not true. This is my trick question for the day. So if you're involved in any of those other functions, you are absolutely, your primary job function is innovation, because if you're doing process improvement, that is innovation. That is your job. And I would advocate for the other ones, but I won't try to argue with people about that yet, but I'll show you some more. So this is me. We already talked about that. Okay. So since we're an ASQ organization, we have to have learning objectives. We're going to talk about this concept of jobs to be done and pains and gains related to the jobs the customer tries to do. And then we're going to understand how quality tools enable innovation. Okay, right away, I'm going to go to poll number 2. So I'd like to know what percentage of your company's improvement projects reach their goals and are sustained. That's important too.
Indeed, Ron. It looks like a sort of low number, actually.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to close the poll. It looks like most people have voted already on that. So now let's just share and see what that looks like.
That's actually pretty good. I mean, we don't have a lot in the 75 to 100, but a few in the, but most everybody is below 50%. And that's not surprising. Let me show you some results here. So many studies have found that lean failure rates are between 50 and 95%. So that's what we were just talking about. An Industry Week study in 2007 found that almost 70% of all US plants use lean, but only 2% achieved their objective. And further, 24% achieved significant results. I have references for that you'll see in the slide. But I think pretty much everybody buys this number. A lot has been written about it. And then also, according to McKinsey, a big consulting firm, 70% of change programs fail to achieve their goals. This was from 2015 McKinsey study. Many other studies have shown that 9 out of 10 startups fail. So 90%. And finally, according to the Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen, who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, each year more than 30,000 new consumer products are launched and 80% of them fail. Other industry reports suggest that up to 95% of new products fail. So why did I give you these different things, new businesses, startups, process, and all that? Well, they're all definitely related. So process improvement, new products, startup businesses, it's all about innovation, and most fail. So that's the key here. Innovation usually fails. Why? That's right. So let's ask another poll. We're going to slow down on the polls in a minute, but why do you think most new products fail? And I've just given some selection here. You may have other, but competition, ran out of cash, no market need, product defects, quality issues.
Okay, I'm getting ready to close this one up.
Okay.
We'll show the results.
So no market need. How many percent is that? I can't read it.
31%.
Wow. This group is aligned with me. So anyway, okay. According to CDI Insights and other people, this has been pretty well studied. The numbers always come out about the same. 19% failed due to competition. 29% failed because they ran out of cash. No, that's not because they didn't have enough money necessarily. It's because it took them too long to find the right market before they ran out of cash. So no market need. The largest number of failures were caused by not finding a market need. That's kind of odd to me anyway when I first saw that. Many businesses are technology pushes, cool tech, but no customers. And where I work with startup companies through the National Science Foundation, and I can tell you that this is a low number when it comes to high tech companies. The NSF supports, as they call, deep technology companies. So, in fact, according to the National Science Foundation, 76% of the failures are the result of creating the wrong thing or creating something for the wrong customer. That is building something that nobody wants. Failure to identify the correct market and not focusing on a specific product market strategy, or what we call product market fit. Remember that term, product market fit. So 99% of all startups die from suicide, not murder. This is according to the Y Combinator playbook, which is written by Sam Altman. Sam Altman is the founder of Y Combinator, which is the most successful startup incubator on the planet. They're out in California and they've had a lot of successes. So how does a business commit suicide, you might ask? By creating something that no one cares about. We already covered that, right? So in other words, they do not achieve a product market fit. So this is a product market fit. It's all about, it's when somebody sees your product or idea and they say, give that to me now. Here's my credit card, or let me write a check. Only when your customer is willing to pay do you know that you have a good product market fit, and they should be really excited. It should be so compelling when you're doing some new innovation or proposing something new that they propose providing you the funding. This is not just, you know, new stuff on the market. This is when you're trying to pitch your program at work. If you've really resonated with your management or the board of directors or whoever it is, you've got a process improvement thing, you've justified it, they want to write you a check right away. You don't get that go back and study this more sort of excuse. Okay, here's an example of a good product market fit. People are familiar with this. This is actually back from the iPhone 5 release in Hong Kong. I think this is their first one. Customers are lined up to buy, and we've seen this over and over again. So that's what this presentation is really about, creating something that customers care about. And how do we do that? Maybe we should start by asking the customer what they care about, right? That makes sense. But we constantly talk about the voice of the customer, but we don't really have a good process to uncover customer needs or outcomes. Okay, so here's poll 4. Again, before building a new product, program, or process, how important is it to do surveys to find out what the customer really wants? Yeah, conventional marketing sends a marketing person out, talks to the customer, and they come back, they do a marketing requirements document, which is converted in a technical requirements document, which goes to engineering through some phase gate process, and eventually a product comes out. They start manufacturing small numbers and see what happens.
Okay, I'm getting ready to close this poll.
Okay.
Results. So
extremely important. Oh, finally, I have a chance to be controversial. This is good. So I want to convince you that although this is very important to start with, and much better than just sending out the marketing person to talk to the customer, surveys are inherently backward looking and biased. Meaning, if you're writing a survey, you're thinking about things in the past to frame your questions, and you're asking basically, well, you're always asking about things that have happened in the past. It's very difficult for you to predict the future or to really understand what's going on with a customer. And that's just the way surveys are, but they're still important, better than just asking people to tell you. So Lean teaches innovation or value, which is what innovation is, begins, or which innovation creates, begins with the customer or the voice of the customer. But this is what Henry Ford had to say about this. If I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So does this contradict our Lean principle of the voice of the customer? Should we abandon the voice of the customer the way Henry Ford seemed to imply? The answer is no. We should always talk to the customers, but we just shouldn't let them define solution. That's our job. We're the technology people or the experts in our area. Steve Jobs said, some people say, give the customer what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they're going to want before they do, and that is true. That's what we're going to do. Discover customer needs, but don't ask the customer for solutions. You are the product, technology, process, service expert, not the customers. You figure out what is needed to satisfy customer problems or fix a pain. They don't know what solutions are available. Our job is to find out what their needs are. That's what customer-driven innovation about, and that's what customer discovery is about. Or here's another twist. If you look at the picture, you might say the customer wants a 1/4-inch drill. but people don't want a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. This is the job that they're trying to do. This is the outcome they are looking for when they buy a 1/4 inch drill. So what we're going to talk about is what I call customer driven innovation, which is listening to the customer, and we use quality tools, lots of standard quality tools, but the new approach, the new addition is this new called jobs to be done concept, created by Tony Ulwick and Clayton Christensen. Tony Ulwick invented the term outcome driven innovation. Clayton Christensen wrote the book Innovator's Dilemma. So here's just one slide that shows Tony Ulwick's success rate, which if you look on the right-hand side, I have my little laser pointer here, you can see using this strategy, you get almost a 90% success rate. This Pareto thing keeps coming up. We keep talking about 90% failures, and now we have something that has a 90%, nearly 90% success rate. The average success rate, according to all these various consulting firms, is around 17%. So this result's over 5 times better. So let's talk about the jobs to be done methodology and how that increases your success. So here's the flow. Here's a simple process steps that are to be done. The first step may seem odd, but that's to identify the customer. Believe it or not, usually we don't get a good grasp on that. Even when we're doing process, we may find out, we think we know who the customer is, but it's really somebody else. We know that our customer is the next person in line, but there's often other people that are writing the check that we need to understand, and sometimes we're selling to the wrong people. That's especially true in startup companies. So then what we have to do, and we know this from Lean, you have to talk to the people, the customer, and find out what it is that they're trying to do. And we call that their job to be done. And more on that in a second. And then we design a value proposition. Again, customer-driven innovation is based on all of these Lean concepts, really to the core. It's very much derived on value, flow, pull, and PDCA, because we're going to use a scientific method to iterate over and over again. Okay, this is a tool we use to identify customers and their jobs. It's just a framework. It's a touchstone away, and it really helps. I've used this over and over again, and it's extremely useful. So this is the value proposition canvas. It's composed of 2 parts, the customer profile and the value map. It allows you to intentionally visualize, design, and test how you create value for your customers. This allows us to focus on the parts of the business model that are most important. The value proposition for a specific customer segment. Now, each customer essentially, you use this to identify their jobs to be done. It's really exciting because it's a new method for capturing the voice of the customer, but we really don't have good process because we don't really have good processes for that. So this is going to be the main takeaway. This is what we focus on, and this is what we use in National I-Corps program, and it is the 80% of the Pareto principle that gives us success. So note that copies of the value proposition and something else called the business model canvas are uploaded or available, I think, with part of this canvasation. So these templates are basically, we give Strategizer, who invented this model, credit, but it's open source for anybody to use. They're my business partner, Strategizer and Strategy. So let's go through this bit by bit. So the first step using the value proposition canvas, or VPC, if you like acronyms, is to uncover the jobs. Describe the jobs your customers are trying to get done. Jobs can be functional, like getting from A to B. They can be social, like impressing friends or colleagues, or they can be emotional, like gaining peace of mind. Next, consider the pains. Highlight the pains which annoy customers when trying to get a job done. They are negative outcomes that customers hope to avoid, like dissatisfaction, challenges, frustrations, risks, or obstacles related to getting your job done. Finally, there's gains. So if the customer can get the job done, how does a customer measure success of the job well done? Gains are positive outcomes, concrete results, benefits, and even aspirations. So you get the team together, because this is a team sport, and you use the fundamental quality management tool, a sticky note. You get your team together and start populating this customer profile with initial hypotheses. They're hypotheses. We don't know if they're true. It's brainstorming part. This will enable your team to visualize, test, and track your understanding of people or companies you intend to create value for. It's a map that becomes clearer the more we learn about the customers by doing interviews, which are the experiments we use to confirm or deny our hypothesis. Okay, the second part of the canvas is the value map. The value map makes it explicit how products and features eliminate specific pains or create gains. Here, your team will list the products and services, over here, products and services that your value proposition builds on. Then you'll list the pain relievers, describe the products and services and features that are pain relievers, how they eliminate or reduce or minimize the pains customers care about, making their lives easier. Finally, there's the gain creators in this part, outline how the products and services produce, increase, or maximize outcomes and benefits that your customers expect, desire, or would be surprised by. So again, it's a sticky note. Your team should populate the map with initial hypotheses. It'll enable your team to visualize, test, and track your understanding of value, of the value proposition. The value map makes it explicit. So it's written now. It makes it explicit how your products and services relieve pains and create gains. Use it to design, test, and iterate the value proposition. The important thing is it forms the basis of your hypothesis testing. So this is what we call the product market fit. Once you put these two together, a value proposition and the pains and the gains and the jobs to be done. You achieve this by creating a clear connection between what matters to customers and how your products, services, and features solve these pains and gains. We call this process customer discovery, and you follow the scientific method of hypothesis testing to validate the canvas and fit, or we call it plan, do, check, act. So here's a key, is that you want to connect. You're not going to test all of these. You're going to pick out a few of these relationships and notice that on the left-hand side, for example, this particular value proposition addresses this particular pain. So it gets very specific. You don't have a mishmash of stuff here. So you pick out these. We're going to test these hypotheses first and see if they're true. And note there's one other factor involved in this. Sometimes we find out, yeah, they have a pain, but again, we have to go back to the Pareto principle. When you're talking to your customer and you're interviewing them, you're not just interviewing them about the pain you're interested in, about the whole of the drill you're trying to sell them. You want to find out about their overall pain and gain. You may find out that even though there's somewhat of a fit, because they may have a pain that will allow you to address that, but in terms of their major pains, it's way down on the list. So even though it's a pain, and even though you have a feature or a product that could satisfy it, you'll find out in this interview process what are the biggest concerns. We interviewed fire departments. We had this unique technology to use virtual augmented reality glasses and for training. Well, that was great, but when we found out after many interviews with fire departments and others that, well, although this was important and they thought, they needed help in training, and the reality is that that was a very low impact. They had other big concerns. The fire chief might be more concerned with scheduling, and that might be way more important than training at the time. So this is why you go through the trouble of talking to your customer and finding out what all of their pains are, not just the pain related to your particular prejudice. So here's a value proposition hypothesis, which we create this out of the interviews and out of those specific relationships that I talked about either. So it goes like this: our product or service helps a particular customer segment who wants a job to be done, who wants to do this by reducing, avoiding, or whatever a customer pain and increasing, enabling a customer gain. Okay, so up until now, this has been quite easy. Grab a latte, and the team, grab a conference room, populate the canvas with sticky notes, high five each other when the map is full of sticky notes, and start manufacturing, right? No, you don't even send out marketing yet. This sounds like so many of those other management fads we've participated in. I don't want to mention some because we might get mad, but I participated in. We create a document, put it on the shelf where it stays until the next management review. So what do we do with these hypotheses? Next, test your hypotheses. Get out of the building. That's the mantra in most of these programs is get out of the building, get off your chair and go out and interview. Okay, we can't do that now. So we have a pandemic, but in the past, that was like, the restriction was if you have to, you could do a video call or something like that, a Zoom meeting, but you just don't pick up subtle signals unless you're sitting right in front of somebody. For the time being, we're going to do it with WebEx, Zoom, or whatever. But so now that you have the initial guess, we proceed to validate the hypothesis. Note that most of your hypotheses will be wrong, and your goal should be to invalidate hypotheses, not validate them. I can guarantee this from my work with my teams that I mentored with the NSF. Most are wrong. So it's 80%, 90% are wrong. So the hypothesis testing utilizes the scientific method or plan, do, check, act. So let's take a look at this. So what else? So this is my favorite physicist of all time, since I'm a physicist. Richard Feynman, as a Nobel Prize winner, once said, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you're the easiest person to fool. So that's the first thing I want you to think about. If you fool yourself about your great idea, you could be wasting years of your time and your money, or your company's time and your company's money and other people's time and their money. We're not just talking about startup business, we're talking about major improvement projects, product introductions and new systems that you propose or your management might even propose that must be analyzed for effectiveness and return on investment. All of these are innovations that all must pass the innovation test. Watch out for confirmation bias. Don't ask leading questions. Try to invalidate your hypotheses, and never, never, never in an interview tell anybody about what your product is, what your idea is, what your proposal is. The goal of the interview is to learn about the customer, not pitch an idea. This is hard. That's the hardest thing for anybody who's creative and has a great idea. So you need to test each of those sticky notes, and we've chosen as important, the dotted line ones. Each one is a hypothesis or a guess that we created back in our office. This is what you want to do before the interview. First, write down your clear, specific hypothesis. Like SMART goals, it should be clear and very specific to those very specific dotted lines. And with your aim, you should write the aim. This is called being falsifiable in science. Your aim is to be able to disprove it. That is very important. Try to disprove your hypothesis. Remember Feynman's quote, you're the easiest one to fool. Then you write down the results, and this is how it's done. We write it like this. Here's what we did, here's what we found, and here's what we're going to do next. This should sound like plan, do, check, act, right? Plan, do, study, act. Each test should lead to another hypothesis. This is essentially an infinite process. You just keep doing it. Eventually you'll build a product, but first of all, you have to go through many dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of these. So this is in your material that I provided. It's a strategizer template. You don't need this, you can make it up yourself, but it's a nice thing that covers the material that I just talked about. So it's in the material. Okay, so we go out, we interviewed the customer, we tested our hypothesis, and we found out we were wrong. Now, wrong doesn't mean you're completely wrong. it means that and you don't just give up on a hypothesis after one interview, but after 5 or 6 or whatever interviews, you may start to see a trend, and you realize that you need to modify or completely replace a hypothesis. When you do this at a large scale, later on, you've probably heard this in the startup community, a very common term, it's called a pivot, and it's very common. Most teams pivot many times. And when I say teams, that means process teams, improvement teams, OpEx teams, whatever the team is, product teams pivot many times. The key is to pivot before you spend all the money on tooling, right? This happens I worked for Motorola. We built Iridium. Anybody know about the satellite system that went bankrupt and they sold off to somebody else? I think it's still in existence. They also built a display factory built on nanotube technology. They built the whole factory based on some marketing studies. That didn't work out so well. So this is extremely common. I had some examples. Dean Kamen, who created that basically unicycle that you see running around. There's a lot of failed products out there. It's best to find out before you've committed and started building prototypes, cutting metal and reshaping the line and redoing everything, that you're going to accomplish the right thing, and that there's a customer that really wanted that change, or a manager that really wanted that change. Okay, so once you're finished with many interviews, we go on to the next stage. We're not going to talk about that for this, but I just want to show you what it looks like. This all has to fit into the remaining part of a business model, what we call the business model canvas. Business model canvas looks like this. Those items that are in green, this is the value proposition. We just saw it in a different form, but that's what it is, a value proposition and customer segments. The difference is here, we put multiple customer segments in here, multiple value propositions, whereas the previous tool was used for just one customer. So, but all the key aspects of a business are here: partners, activities, everything, channels, sales channels, customer relationships, and the revenue aspect. All these need to be tested. But remember, what we're interested in is the 80-20 rule. And this is where businesses mostly fail 80% of the time, by building something that nobody actually wants. So if all you do is this part in green and forget the rest of it, you'll be farther ahead. Next, and finally next, is the part where you finally, the innovator, they wanted to do this at the beginning. Now you build what's called the minimum viable product. You heard that statement. And this is where things such as the lean startup methodology or design thinking enter. You don't do design thinking until you've tested your hypothesis with your customer and constructed a value proposition. Many people are doing design thinking first. Remember, if you're doing design thinking, you've already assumed you know what people want, and that's not true. So when I say validate, that doesn't mean, again, that you have to get tooling or build a prototype. Validating means now you can go out and talk to the customer and share with them your idea. It can be a sketch, it can be a PowerPoint. In fact, it should be at first a sketch, a wireframe, a PowerPoint. At each step of the way, the key word here is minimum. Well, the minimum it takes to share with your customer what your idea is. That means if you're at a company and you have come up and you talk to the next person in the process and found out who the customer is, and that their biggest pain is the way they're getting parts in a carrier rather than some burr on the actual part itself. Who knows what the biggest pain is, but you find out what the major pain is, what the biggest source of their rework or aggravation is, and then after you interviewed and gone through that process and validated that, then you come back to validate it with, well, what if we did this? What do you think about that? And that's when they'll start sharing some actual feedback. By the way, you know what's going to happen if you go talk to people who like you, friends and families and others, at the beginning stage of all this. Nobody wants to hurt your feelings. So it's important to keep an arm's length away when you're doing most of these, doing the initial stage. All right, so here's the summary. First thing you do is customer discovery, which is what I talked about, the jobs to be done. And then you do the customer validation, building the based on lean and agile principles and design thinking, you do the customer validation. But first you do the other process. So here's I want to assert to you the second part of what I want to talk about and how this jobs to be done will fit into the whole ability to have very high success when you're done. And the assertion is that conventional marketing and segmentation doesn't work. So here's poll number 5. When gathering voice of the customer data, how important is it to segment data by demographics such as age, location, occupation, and ethnicity, etc.?
Okay, I'm going to close this poll and share the result.
It's very important. So it's kind of all over the place. It is so, and I want to share with you that it's better than nothing, but I'll show you why it's not so great. Here's I'm going to talk to you about a better way. You know, obviously you want to do demographics when we do surveys, especially satisfaction surveys, and as much demographics as we can get is extremely helpful. But for creating forward-looking, remember we're trying to predict the future. For generating forward-looking thing, the most effective segmentation isn't that. It turns out that that's too much of an average, and you'll see in a second. So in this outcome-driven innovation, that's what ODI means, research reveals unmet needs, right? And that's the key to innovation, unmet needs that we get from outcomes. And the outcomes are what we learn when we do that. We find out what the jobs are and what their pains are. So on the left-hand side, it's we find out, we do this after we have done the interviews. Then we come back and do some surveys. So we start out with a focus group, some people, and we sit down with them, do interviews, and then we follow up with, once we've derived the outcomes, we follow up with these surveys with a whole bunch, a number of different areas. But what we get is, again, we want to find out if the job that we've uncovered, how important it is. Like I said, it may be a problem, but it may be down on the list of a lot of problems. Like in the case of the fire department, we found a problem, but it was way down the list. So outcome 1, let's say here it says somewhat important. Outcome 2, extremely important. So that's how important it is. And on the right-hand side, we use looking at a solution. How satisfied are you with your ability to do this particular solution to your problem? You know, are you very satisfied on outcome 1, or are you not very satisfied, or only somewhat satisfied on outcome 1? So we send out, this particular example came from 270 professional users of circular saws in the US, including farmers, etc., roofers, carpenters, remodelers. So this is real. This is a real survey. So here's the results. Now let me explain this. This is the satisfaction score, 0 to 10 on the left-hand side. And on the bottom here is how important. So remember we had the 2, on how satisfied and how important it is. So let's say if something is extremely important and people are very unsatisfied, we call that underserved. If something is not important and well satisfied, then it's overserved. This is like the Kano model, right? After a while, you know, you could fit that into that. People, what used to be important is now just expected. And so you can see things move across the underserved to overserved part of this chart. Now, when we just broke this down into standard demographics or took all the results, put them all together, in this particular case, this is what you get. A bunch of dots representing the results in the middle of the screen. So a normal marketing team would say this, well, look, it's pretty, we have some people, it's pretty well, yeah, you know, we have a group that we can market to. We could have a, let's start production because we have some customers here that it's relatively important to, and they're relatively unsatisfied. So we can go. Well, as you might guess, that's probably not the right way to do it. So let's take a look at what we were talking about before. Rather than breaking demographically down or averaging the results or breaking down into the standard demographics, take all those outcomes. And here comes a little bit of statistical analysis or possibly even sort of AI thing where we learn how to group the various outcomes together. In this particular case, just generically, outcome 10, 3, 4, and 11 are grouped together, and we call that, and this is a group factor 1. And so we look at this as one variable, right? And the same thing with group factor 2, different outcomes. And so now we segment according to these variables, variable 1, 2, and 3. Now this doesn't make as much sense, it's more abstract, but here's what actually happens. Voila. Now you've got a real spread in the data. And you're gonna, anybody who knows about stratification diagrams understands this. If you're in manufacturing, you can plot stuff, you not see any clear idea. I'll show you that in a second. But here we can see the same data. There's a group of people with some very specific outcomes that are completely underserved. Now, is that enough people to start developing a product? That's up to the manufacturer. It could be a process. If you're interviewing people in different plants, you could end up with the same thing where many people are underserved. But is it enough to change the process? Is it enough to retool the line, etc.? That's another question, whether it's worth it. But these are more obvious, right? There are groups of different customers. Look at, there's a group here, 15% of these customers are very overserved, right? But it's very important to them. So you could design the right product then to address those particular people. On the other hand, there's 21% of the customers where it's relatively important and not very well served. So that you might consider a different type of product using different type of features that address different outcomes. But this is probably the hottest area, 31%. This is a good chunk of your market that are pretty well underserved, right? It's pretty important to them, but they have very low satisfaction scores. But more importantly, you've got these outcomes which allow you to design specific features that address specific pain points. And so this sort of differentiation and market segmentation is very important. As I said, if you're in manufacturing, if you were to look, I should have put the other slide up, but if you were to look at these dots here, this is a standard thing that I use in quality classes all the time. You show the class the dots from iron parts per million, and then you have percent purity over here on the left-hand side. And you show them this without any lines drawing around them, just black, everything black dots, and there's no correlation, there's nothing there. You don't see anything. But then you create a stratification diagram where you look at the reactor 1, reactor 2, and reactor 3, and you see, well, look at that, holy smokes. There's quite a trend line here for reactor 3, maybe not as much for reactor 1, but there's somewhat of a trend line here for this. Well, if I were gonna pick my project out, and I know you Lean Six Sigma people, which I am too. I started out at, by the way, I should say, I started out at ASQ, Motorola doing this kind of stuff. And it's a Six Sigma black belt. So we know that this is the project to propose because we can actually see the trend line. Okay, so that's it. In this session, I hope that you have an idea. This is a many-day experience learning how to do this in detail, but I think you could probably go out and do it right now because you got the basics. So hopefully you understand jobs to be done. Mainly, you should understand the philosophy that you're talking to people and asking, not sharing your idea, asking them about what they try to do in their day. You can ask them, you know, right from when you get up in the morning or when you get to the office, what do you start doing, and find out, well, their biggest problem is getting a cup of coffee. I'm just kidding about that, but that you may find out in the whole world that they're living in, the thing that you think is their pain is really trivial. So that's important. The idea of hypothesis testing, the scientific method, creating a specific hypothesis and testing it, very important. So I hope you understand what I mean by pains and gains and the jobs to be done. And as you can see, that the standard process flow of quality, starting with the customer, the voice of the customer, and using simple quality tools to help you segment the data and understand what's going on, are very enabling for innovation. So I hope that you believe that you are in the innovation business now. So that's the next question. So let me know what you think.
Okay, I'm going to close it and then share. You can see the results.
Yes. Oh boy, I'm successful. No, seriously, this is not glib. I don't think most of us realize. I mean, today, as you can see, I usually start out with this example of somebody who's running a cart in Pakistan and how they shifted from a food cart to providing sanitation services to unmet need, underserved. You know, in the today, at times of pandemic, we've seen this over and over again. How many new companies? Look at Zoom, the darling of Wall Street. There are a lot of companies out there that innovation is, they've had to pivot, they've had to change. Some companies have gone out of business, but many companies have found an opportunity. We all are in the innovation business, and if we're not innovating, we're going to be in trouble. So these are my partners. Strategizer, which is the business model canvas. Strategen came up, jobs to be done. Again, I work with I-Corps and Missouri Science and Technology. So thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. It was a lot of fun for me, and I hope, please let me know if you want to learn more. Some of the I shared some of the resources. So thanks again. With that, I'll end it. It's all yours, Manny.
Okay, yeah, so there was a question that said, is the slide deck and the recording going to be made available?
Yes.
I can tell you that we did record this, and it should be up on LED's YouTube channel within 48 hours. As far as the slide deck itself is concerned, Ron, I think that maybe people should just reach out to you directly for that.
Well, I'll provide it to you if you'd like, or they can reach out to me, but I can provide it directly. I just have to scrub a few of the, put in some references and attributions to some sources, but however you want to handle it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to see, where is this presentation recorded? So that was a question. It's going to be up on ASQ's Lean Enterprise Division's YouTube channel. So if you just go to YouTube and search for ASQ LED, you will find it. Questions? Any questions for Ron? Feel free to chat them. Let's see. So I got one comment. It says the eye opener was that figure out the jobs to be done before the design thinking starts. So I looked like it was just a comment there. Somebody else said, thanks for your help. I can't wait to apply this to internal customers. Somebody else is saying, good presentation.
Thanks.
So that's always nice to hear.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I've got some other comments. Could you explain again how the outcome-based segmentation is performed? I had a hard time following the steps.
Yeah, that I can a little bit more. So it's the segmentation, as you know, it gets into regression analysis. That part is where we get into the data analysis and analytics. And so that's what it's required. You notice there were multiple outcomes. And so that's why I mentioned that you can actually use some simple AI to start to put those outcomes together and look at how they cluster. You know, if anybody's familiar with some statistical analysis programs, it's looking at clustering. I know JUMP does clustering and will allow you to take different factors and will go through them and cluster the results. So that the goal of the clustering algorithm is to find clusters. And so then once you have some potential clusters, then you go look at the various outcome data that went into making that cluster. So it's all pretty mathematical, but it's not. I mean, it's rocket science, but it's not rocket science for us because there's software out there that will do it for us. I hope. Do you understand? I hope you understand what I'm saying. It's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are some more questions. I have one question here. It says, how do you navigate a culture in an organization that does not favor innovation?
Well, you don't have to tell them it's innovation. You just have to tell them you're interested in their opinion. You know, so you can, when you're dealing with your management, it's up to you. Can be a very bottoms-up approach. Your team has to be on the same page. You have to agree that you're going to go out and talk to people, but it doesn't have to be this is cheap stuff, right? You've got sticky notes and some cards and an Excel spreadsheet. By the way, with our I-Corps teams, we usually do over 100 interviews because you find out that's for a product. You know, I don't think you'd have to do as many for a process where everybody's pretty familiar. But the reason is it takes about 30 to 50 interviews for the teams to get used to how to ask people about their job and their pains without without telling them what they have in mind. So what we do is just do some play acting and eventually you get the hang of it. So the answer is you can go and you don't have to go into all the details. You just go out and start interviewing, and if you want to get some buy-in from your management, you tell them that you're going to start interviewing because you want to develop a project to save money or to improve the process, increase quality, and that's innovation. You don't have to tell them you're reinventing the wheel.
I have another question here. Let me see. Where was it? How do you make certain another company does not take your idea when you do decide to present the idea to initial potential customers?
Oh, well, by the time you get to the point where you have an idea, you've been through this process of validating or customer discovery, and you have a segment. Remember, it's not the idea that's important. They may, if they stole all your information and understood the idea as it related to a particular customer segment, then you'd have trouble. So you have to guard that. But the idea itself is not the important part. That's the point. I should have emphasized this more. Once you have the outcomes, the problems, once you have the pains, that companies take that. And my partner at Strategen did this with one company. Once they found out the pains, they were just able to recycle that over and over. See, when you do conventional marketing, you go out and find out from your customer what they want. I was at Motorola, it was a bigger battery. We want a bigger battery. And so if we created a better battery, we'd have one, that was it. But if we go out and find out what the actual outcome was, which was in the case, and we did that at first, by the way, we were with Tony a long time ago, we found out that what they really wanted is not to think about it. They wanted low inertia. So they didn't even need a battery. They just didn't know it. Just like a customer used to think they needed a high-speed Intel processor, and Apple showed them that they don't need that. They just needed a solution that worked. In my case, for the battery, it could have been, well, the battery, the actual lifetime of the battery is only 15 minutes, but there's little inductive charging stations all over the plants. Every time you walk by it, it would recharge your two-way radio in this particular case. I mean, that doesn't exist, but that's an example of that. So once you have a specific pain and for a specific customer segment, that's the key. Your ideas aren't that important, but you know, people do steal ideas, but I don't think it would work for them if they didn't have the other data.
Okay, got some more questions here. How does the Kano model fit into this presentation?
Oh, like I said, that is on that. Like I said, this. Let's go back. This is a perfect example here, where you may start out where you have an underserved market, right? Because something they have new problems, right? It's basically based on their problems. The Kano model works because you eventually, well, let's see, the standard thing, we have GPS in a car, right? Or Apple Play or whatever in the car. It used to be the only people that could get that were people buying the highest end BMW. You can look out now, BMW is coming out with a car that you can start from your phone, right? And only their top of the line BMWs will have it. In a few years, right, every car is going to have it, all the Hondas, etc. So the problem is, what's the problem? The problem is that I don't want to carry my keys, because what's the problem? Because I lose them. Or the other I've always had my phone, I hardly ever lose that. Or the keys are bulgy in my pocket. If you've ever seen some of these key fobs for the luxury cars, they're like as big as a brick. So these are the problems, right? So as you identify the problems and as time goes on, this market becomes less of a problem, just like in the Kano model. So now we're just focused on problems. So take the solutions that delighted the customer, the problems that were big to the customer, invert that. The problems that were big are no longer a problem. The thing that delighted the customer no longer delights the customer, it's just expected. It's the same trend, it's the same lines on the graph, and you can picture lines on one of these graphs as the product or time evolves. Does that make sense? I hope.
Yeah.
At least that's how I see it.
I think so. Maybe one more question. So first, there's a comment that says, fantastic presentation. Ron, can you speak more about how machine learning and AI will affect or change this type of analysis?
Oh, well, yes. So it's actually the more machine learning and AI, as you know, the results of that are often indiscernible. You come up with a solution, but you don't know what the model was. That's the problem with AI, right? But when you're applying the basic ideas of a neural network to sort these factors, so it's slightly different. Like when you do a cluster analysis, it's like AI, but you don't lose the factors, right? And so this is built in, as I said, to JUMP and SAS. And I'm sure, I don't know, well, actually I know that it's also doing cluster analysis is also in R. It's actually, it uses similar algorithms, but it's more in the realm of what we call data science, not so much in the realm of machine learning. But you can imagine, let's take a different approach here. And this is something that I'm excited about, is taking a Bayesian approach, right? So this is static. Remember I talked about marketing being backwards looking, but if you use Bayesian thinking, and Bayesian statistics, you're always gathering data. And remember, I said you keep interviewing customers. So this would fit in very well to this scheme and to the Kano model, which we just talked about. If we keep collecting data, you would see this thing evolve if we keep feeding it into a Bayesian model. And that's how the most important aspect I see of machine, well, usually comes under machine learning, is Bayesian thinking and changing this whole thing in time so that you can catch trends before your competition does.
Okay. Okay, I think that helps. So I see it's a little after 2 o'clock now, so we're trying to end on time. So folks, thanks you for participating in this month's webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in October as well.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there.
Okay. All right, folks, like I said, the recording will be up on YouTube in about 48 hours. All right, hope you folks enjoyed it.
Thanks, Manny. Really appreciate all the work that you put into helping me get this far.
Great presentation, Ron. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thanks, you too.